Marco Reus. Daniel Malen! Wonderful!
Fantastic from Reus. Jude Bellingham, that's excellent. Jude Bellingham, this is absolutely brilliant. Jude Bellingham! Absolutely magnificent.
Reina, brilliant from the American. Just like that.
Graceful, salute down for Anthony Modeste.
Not a bad idea! And there it is, Moukoko for Borussia Dortmund. The long wait is over. Unbridled joy in the Via Derby.
Hey, welcome back to another week and another episode of the BVB podcast. My name's Jake, joined as always by Carver. How are you doing, Carver?
Doing well, thank you.
And we've got a special guest. It's been way too long since we've had him on. He joined us in the preseason to do get ready for the season. We probably should have had him on a little sooner. I think this whole season's been a little crazy. I think Carver and I had aspirations to get a lot of guests on, and then when we realized like how quick and fast the games were coming, we kind of were just like, we didn't really have time for it. But very happy to have Brian back with us, who is a contributing writer for BVB Buzz. Brian, I'm bummed I missed you in New York, but I'm glad that we're hanging out now. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be talking Dortmund with you guys, and no worries. I'm sure you'll end up in New York at some other time, but I'm very glad that the Brooklyn Borussian fan club took good care of you. So I'm glad you enjoyed banter.
Yeah, it was a great time. And unfortunately, not as great final game of the first half of this season against Borussia Mönchengladbach, which we, of course, are going to, maybe we won't spend too much time on that because I don't know if anyone really wants to hear us just be sad again. I mean, maybe they're used to it by now, but we'll recap that game a little bit. We'll kind of go through the season so far and Brian's takes on the season. We got like Brian's takes before the season started. So it'll be interesting to see maybe how things have, maybe, I don't know if he's gotten sad in the meantime, but we'll run through that.
We're all sad, so it's all right.
So we'll run through that. We are going to get ready for World Cup and preview some USMNT stuff. We've got some Twitter questions. We have something coming up. Carver and I are in St. Louis, and there's something really exciting going on this week, which is Bundesliga related. So not really Dortmund related, but except the fact that we have Berkey. But it is Bundesliga related. So we're going to talk about that. And then as we are in this kind of halfway point of the season, we've got a mid-season survey that we want your feedback on, which we will get into all that later. But let's start with Gladbach. You guys ready to be sad again?
I never stopped being sad. So
yeah, I told Jake right before we started recording that watching the highlights genuinely triggered me.
It was hard. It was hard.
All right, and we'll just jump right in before we really dive into the game. I'll just start with the lineup. Of course, we were away at Gladbach, and we saw Chan come in for Özcan. Reina got the start over Adeyemi. Malen was still in the lineup. I was a little surprised about, but the full lineup read: Kobel in goal, Guerrero, left back Schlotterbeck, Hummels in the middle, Sule out at right back again. Like I mentioned, Chan and Bellingham in the middle, with Malen, Brandt, and Reina, and then Moukoko got the start up top. Brian, we'll start with you. Just like initial thoughts, seeing the lineup and going into this game. I don't know why I had some weird sense of confidence, not from seeing the lineup, but I was just like feeling good. I just didn't think we would end on a bad note, but I mean, seeing the lineup or going into the game, Brian, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, contrary to, what we saw, particularly from the defense, you look at those names in there and you think that's looking pretty solid, that should be a pretty solid back line, and there shouldn't be as much worries as Gladbach actually ended up causing us, particularly because, I mean, granted, they haven't been perfect defensively, but they've been a lot more solid this season than they have in previous seasons up until at least this game. So, I mean, initially from there, I thought, okay, that looks decent. Having Chen in the midfield is obviously always a little bit of an anxiety-inducing experience, just because you can always maybe not expect him to do something, but you can always. Well, I guess maybe that is what I'm trying to say. Yes, you can always expect him to do something that may put off the team's performance. And then, of course, when you're looking at the front line, I mean, we mentioned that, or you mentioned rather, that you were surprised to see Malen in the lineup, but at the end of the day, we came into the season without any real wingers. So it's like, who are we actually putting up there in those wide positions to fill those roles if we're not putting him in? Adeyemi himself hasn't been in great form either as of recent. So you're kind of not really spoiled for choice there. Then, of course, there's still the injuries that you're dealing with. So it's all in all, you're putting together a team with what you have. And I guess that was the best lineup that you could have had from what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think I'm just a little more biased towards Adeyemi. I'm a little bigger fan of him than Malen. And so I think seeing Reyna come in and just, I know Adeyemi and Malen both have not been great, but I would almost rather put him in there, let Malen start on the bench. That's just where I am at back. But Carver, to you on the lineup and thoughts before the game. What are you thinking?
I'm going to have a little bit differing opinion from both of you and say I probably would have started Hazard. It's been one of the very few games I would have maybe fancied him to be on the pitch to begin with, just because he's going against his old side. And his first return to Gladbach as a Dortmund player, he scored a very, very good goal. So I thought he could maybe spark something up here, given the chance to start. Obviously, he's an actual wide player. He's one of the, I think, actually, now I'm thinking about the only one that's available at the moment that is a winger and can whip in some crosses and maybe cause a little bit more harm to their back line. I know with Scally in their lineup, he tends to push up really high. So I would have been personally playing Hazard at the moment because, Malen and Adeyemi, it's like they're competing to see which one can be more disappointing every week,
That's actually a fair shout.
The issue with Hazard is like we needed him for depth, left back depth. Unfortunately, is where he's at right now.
Yeah.
But starting this game, I mean, for the first few minutes, I thought we started well. We created a chance pretty early on. In the second minute, Reyna had a header from a great Brandt cross. Moukoko had another long shot, trying to go for a worldie right off the bat. But hey, he scored before like that, so I don't have any fault there. And then after some quick attacks in the first few minutes, we obviously saw Mönchengladbach on their first. It was basically like the first time they crossed our half with the ball. First chance, first goal, easily pulled apart. And unfortunately, that's just kind of how the game went after that. We did get a goal, 2 goals back. But, I mean, just thoughts on the goal and the defensive collapsing. Do you think it was a defensive thing? Do you think it was Gladbach being great or us being terrible? I'm going with terrible, but Brian, I'll start with you.
I think I'll have to agree with that because it was far too easy. At least my reaction to watching it seemed as if the Gladbach players were literally walking through our defense. It didn't seem like anyone was really up to speed with their tempo of play. Everyone seemed one step behind everything. I mean, even looking specifically at that first goal, I mean, you have Sule and Schlotterbeck, I believe, trying to close down. I believe it was, who was it that scored exactly again that first goal? If you guys don't mind reminding me. Jonas Hoffman, exactly. So seeing him come in like that and having 2 defenders basically almost getting him in a pincer type situation and still not being able to close him down is a little disappointing. I mean, same thing with the Thuram goals. Those, Hummels being, relatively slow to react to those. Schlotterbeck slipping for what I believe was the 3rd goal as well, and then not, doing enough to catch up to the attackers in that play as well. I just think everyone was kind of off it in the game.
Yeah, Brian really said it in even the first sentence. I feel like this entire game could be wrapped up with just a simple statement of far too easy. I mean, I told Jake right before we started recording too that I was just screaming at my TV pretty much all 90 minutes. Like, why is it that easy for Gladbach to do this to us? I mean, it was really just a half-ass challenge from Chan right before their half, and they passed it off to Stindl, who picked up the ball literally at the halfway line and just casually strolled all the way to the top of our box. Reyna and Malen just jogging aside him, not really trying to pick him up, put any sort of pressure, throw him off. And then Hummels steps up, which, of course, you have to step up, but Hoffman made that good diagonal run that you already mentioned, Brian, and no one's picking him up yet again. So it's just an easy goal for Gladbach to score in those first opening minutes. I mean, just way too easy. That's schoolboy stuff.
And then I'm not gonna break down like every little thing because it's just sad. Like we're already sad, and it's sad to do. Like here's every time we collapsed and we fell apart, and it was just horrendous to watch. But I mean, I think it was like around the 15th minute, like we did need Kobel to make another big save. which just alluded to what was going to happen the rest of the game. Despite, I thought we had a pretty good reaction after the first goal. And like we were continuing getting good positions. We weren't like extremely dangerous, but it looked like filled me with confidence a little more. Like, okay, we're getting back into this. We're going to do this. But then they just kept on like strolling through the midfield and the defense. Like anytime they went down the field, it seemed like they're going to score or have a really good chance. There was a bit of redemption in the 19th minute with amazing cross or ball in from from Bellingham with Brandt just being beautiful with that touch and that turn and the volley shot. I think because the goal was so amazing, I put in my notes, it was like, we're winning this game. and sadly, that did not play out. But I was filled with so much confidence with that goal. I mean, was there anything, if you guys could talk about the goal if you want, Brian, any positives from this game, though, before we might break down the defensive lapses a little more and like individual performances, but any positive takes from this game?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned one, Julian Brandt, honestly, for the last, I would say, month and a half has been really one of Dortmund's more consistent players. And of course, people will continue to talk about the fact that most of his time at Dortmund has been less productive than we would have liked. But he really has become one of Dortmund's more consistent players. And that finish was amazing. To be able to take down the ball like that, back to goal, that's like a lot of strikers can't do that. So to have your midfielder come out and do that is really nice. And it really showed that he does do better in the center of the park as opposed to, out wide, which is how he's been played previously. Of course, that being because of injuries or previous coach preference. But he's definitely one of the positives there. Obviously, Bellingham putting in that ball as well. I mean, he didn't have a fantastic game, but of course he did still have those moments of brilliance that, we do love him for. But after that, it's kind of hard, isn't it, to to think of anything else, really.
That was an exquisite pass from Jude Bellingham. I mean, that was a world-class assist and also a brilliant finish from Brandt as well. I mean, the ball didn't even bounce. It was still within one motion as he was turning to be able to finish that with his left foot too, if I'm not wrong. I mean, it was a class finish from Brandt, and yeah, it's pretty difficult to think of many other positives from that game, like you were saying, Brian. I mean, they had so much space to run into even before we equalized there. There was pretty much zero defensive structure whatsoever, and it didn't help much either that there was a lot of really poor individual performances on top of that. I mean, Hummel's he still is, arguably, but I mean, going from one of the best performances of his career just a few weeks back to a disaster class this time around it was really, really shocking just watching all around. I mean, Schlotterbeck was struggling and slipping. I mean, actually, a lot of the players on both teams were slipping this game, but it was schoolboy stuff, man. And I think one positive is, outside of the assist is, we had some decent chances here and there. I think the XG was still 3 for us and then 2.1 for Gladbach. But again, that just shows you that they're still more clinical than us. They want the game more than us. And, you're going to get steamrolled if you're not entering this game with the right mentality and that killer instinct.
They're playing that young third string keeper who I think just made his Bundesliga debut like last week. I think he's 20. And he had 8 saves, and I don't know, I felt throughout the game, obviously we didn't have a ton of, we created some chances. We had 10 shots on goal. He had 8 saves. I want to say he had a good game, and that was part of it, but obviously we could have taken better shots. I was just going to ask your guys' thoughts on, was that him having a good game or us just not putting in, really good efforts?
I thought he was really, really good, but we also made him look way better than he already was. I mean, you give that keeper that confidence whenever you're given those shots that aren't great right off the bat and giving him the ability to get some saves and get a feel for the ball. I mean, he was dictating the Gladbach's defense, maybe 15, 20 minutes into the first half even. So it shows how, we let him grow into the game in this one. And that's, again, not how champions act.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd have to agree with Carver there. I think it's a little bit of both, particularly because, you do have players in the Dortmund squad right now that can't buy a goal for anything, That case in point being Daniel Malen. it's really frustrating because he does show a lot of good things in the game, be it with his positioning, his ability to take on defenders. He gets himself in a very good position very often. And then at the end, the final product is usually very underwhelming. So, I mean, if a keeper, especially in their debut, is coming up against a player like that, I mean, yes, they're going to look great because, they're just not putting it past them at that point in time. And then, of course, Dortmund in general has had struggles putting the ball in the back of the net. So, I mean, it was kind of the perfect scenario for this keeper to make a debut and have as good of a performance as he did.
Yeah, there was that moment in his 34th minute where it definitely should have been a goal. Like Moukoko had that header 2 feet out, which was a good. I mean, he headed it right at the keeper, but it was also a good reactionary save from him. It was so close, and he was good to get his hand out on it. And then the ball fell to Reyna, who I think there was a deflection in there, but basically missed a layup of a shot. But making, like you said, the confidence for that kid to make that save initially. And to whether it's a defender who blocked that next shot, of course that's going to build up his confidence too, especially when they started the game with the goal. They went up really early. He's already feeling confident. We pulled it back, but for him to keep, I think, in that moment and to keep it even at that time, obviously is going to shoot up his confidence, which led to him probably being able to save more shots throughout the game. Do you guys want to jump into? I wanted to ask just your thoughts on Hummels and Schlotterbeck. Do you think Hummels specifically, I know there's a lot of, I think, disappointment with not making Germany. Do you think that played into this game at all? Or do you think the lapses in this game were more of what we've seen from Dortmund before? Do you think them just being tired and fed up and ready for the season, this part of the season to end, any frustration from Hummels that played into this? What are your thoughts on Hummels and maybe the collapse in this game specifically?
I mean, there was definitely an element of the fact that he was disappointed with the fact that he wasn't going to the World Cup. I'm sure that was part of it. I mean, you could kind of see it in his body language, a lot of shrugs. His movement wasn't there. Usually that anticipation that he's very much known for just wasn't there. He just didn't seem fully focused on what was happening around him on the pitch. But then again, I mean, even with that sort of scenario, you wouldn't expect for that sort of decision by Hansi Flick to really have that much of an impact on a professional of Hummels' character. I mean, yes, he's human. Obviously, things are going to affect him emotionally, but then you also have performances and I don't know if you guys saw this performance, in the Premier League with Ivan Toney and Brentford beating Manchester City. I mean, he scored, I believe it was both goals for them, and he had just been left out of the England squad, and it was almost kind of a message that was being sent, okay, you're not taking me, but I'm still going to continue performing. So that's what I would more so expect from a player like Hummels, to have a reaction to show, okay, well, this is what you're missing. Instead, he kind of underlined why perhaps he wasn't going in the first place. As it comes to Schlotterbeck, I mean, he started out really great in the squad, and I do feel that over the course of the season, he's had his ups and downs. I wouldn't consider this a damning performance for him by any means. I mean, once again, players have their ups and downs when it comes to their form, but it wasn't what we needed at the time, and I do feel that a lot of the focus, and not even just in the defense, in the team, wasn't as strong as it should have been with regards to this result, particularly with how important it was. It was the final game before a really long break, and we had just lost to Wolfsburg 2-0. So it was a really important game, and I think a lot more focus could have been put into this game.
Yeah, it's kind of been the story of the season almost, of Terzic not putting enough focus into the opponent that he's got in front of him. But yeah, I wonder if, Hummels was, obviously he's had the best season in the last few years, arguably, this season, and maybe he was trying to, showcase himself to be a player in that Germany squad, and then obviously he just was pretty disappointed with not being picked. But yeah, like you said, Brian, it shouldn't be affecting him so much to him, have such a performance like this that's so low. With Schlotterbeck as well, and maybe it just really wasn't either of their night, and it's just one of those games where it's just not going your way no matter what. And you could look at the average position in our squad, and I think they were originally looking to target that left-hand side, like I mentioned last week. They were probably watching the game of us versus Wolfsburg, and Wolfsburg was just going hammering at Guerrero on that left-hand side for a majority of the game, and Gladbach was still doing that. But I think when they also realized that both the partnership of Hummels and Schlotterbeck were extremely vulnerable that night, they were going to punish you in the middle as well, and that's exactly what they did. Again, if you go back to look at the average position, Gladbach played, for the most part, very narrow. And I think they realized that they could continuously get rewarded if they keep playing towards that middle side.
Yeah, and I think part of this too, I didn't analyze this thoroughly, but I think part of it is maybe Chan being in there and not being as set as Ocean, what we've seen from Ocean. And I don't know if that's where the difference is, because like you mentioned, Brian, earlier, that like early on in the season, Schlotterbeck looked good, and just defensively, we looked a lot better. We were grinding out those like 1-0 results. Carv and I were saying a lot like, oh, we're just grinding out these wins. We want to see more goals. But at least we look like stable in the back. We were able to, with the exception of the Werder Bremen game that Carver got to witness in person. I'm sorry, I was bringing that up, Carver. Well, that was the collapse. But even after that, we saw some good defensive performances, and it's just fallen apart lately. And I don't know if I remember seeing like Ozchan very early on. I know it took him a little bit to like really start and get play a lot of minutes, but he's been great. With the exception, maybe the last few weeks, like he hasn't been on top of it as much. And so maybe that's where the defensive lapse has been, because he's not there as that to just sit in front of the two center backs. And maybe that was going on in this game specifically. Any thoughts on Ozchan missing in this game, or him lately, or going down that middle? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, so he's definitely also been a player that, once again started off well, like you mentioned, and then of course has had a little bit of a wobble here and there. I was still shocked to see him on the bench and have Chan starting this game. I didn't really see the utility of having Chan in this game in particular. I definitely feel like Ozchan would have been the better player to screen the back line and to sweep up those balls that would be sent in to trouble the likes of Hummels and Schlotterbeck. So it was a little strange to see him in there, especially like we'd mentioned, considering how important this game was. But yeah, once again, at a club like Dortmund, even if you're putting in a player like Chan, you expect a player like Chan to have a better performance. And he's once again been a player that's underperformed not only this season, but in previous seasons as well. He's had good moments, but then he's had a lot of bonehead moments as well. And yeah, it's just overall disappointing that he couldn't come in as well and do a job. But yeah, in my opinion, it should have been Ozchan on the field.
Chan said in interviews last year that he is a number 6, and that's where he wants to play whenever we were playing him at a position in the back 3. And tell you what, he's been having plenty of opportunities playing in that number 6 role, and he's doing absolutely dick with it at the moment. Jake and I thought his strongest moments last season was in that back 3 or even in the back line in general, whenever he had literally 2 clean sheets in a row on the road of, Paslak, Schultz, and Pangracic with Chan in that back 4. And he was still able to organize that defense and get a clean sheet on the road at Mainz. But it seems like every time he's in the number 6, he's out of position. Like you said, the boneheaded fouls. I think there's been 4 or 5 games this season, and I guarantee I should have looked it up to back me up, but I guarantee it's a fact that handful of games this season he's came on and within 60 seconds he has a yellow card, and that is not an exaggeration. This team genuinely definitely needs a number 6 on top of Ozchan, because we really are having a tough time controlling the midfield in a lot of these games. We lost possession in this game against Gladbach 123 times. And of course, Chan wasn't, the reason for that, are all 123, but he's certainly not helping in the aspects that we need of a true number 6 at the moment, who isn't going to be a constant liability.
Well, we don't need to harp on this game too much longer, but I think it's kind of a good transition point from into kind of the season overall, and Brian's thoughts on that. Because we jumped in the second half. If you had any confidence at halftime, I thought we might still be able to pull it back and make it somewhat exciting. And I just thought we were going to come out in the second half and be more stable in the back. And I thought Terzic would be able to hype them up and really like put on a good game. And then we saw it in the first like 30 seconds that they scored again. So definitely didn't go that way. And then after that, it didn't really get better. It was just sad throughout. So the game ended 4-2. But with that transition, I know we were all pretty excited with this season starting. Kind of felt like we were starting fresh with Terzic, and we were hoping we weren't going to have as much injuries. And then obviously there was all the talk with the league opening up more, with Lewandowski moving out to Bayern. And I mean, we did see the league is still pretty tight. And we saw Union Berlin take the top, although I know Bayern's like 4 points clear at this point, I think, the last I checked, which I didn't check today.
Yeah, they're slowly starting to pull away.
But Brian, I guess at this point in the season, how are you feeling about Dortmund? What have you seen, like, I guess, transition-wise? We did mention started a little defensively, like stronger defensively, and that's kind of fading right now. Like, what are your current thoughts with Dortmund and like your take on this half of the season?
I mean, Dortmund are definitely not where they should be in terms of the table. The performances are definitely subpar. And that comes down a lot to, as you guys mentioned earlier, individual performances, because I feel like that's something that, and especially going into last season and this season, Dortmund rode a lot of a wave in terms of individual performances. I mean, this season, for the most part, Jude Bellingham has been amazing, organizing the midfield. I feel a lot of the play has gone through him. And having him have like one or two not as great games has obviously shown throughout. There's no one else there aside from a 17-year-old Youssoufa Moukoko that has been trying to really step up to that degree, especially in the attack. So overall, relatively disappointing. Obviously, a lot of work needs to be done over the course of the break. Players like Adeyemi and Malen, both have to, really improve and work on their finishing and positioning to a degree over the course of these coming months. I mean, granted, they are playing in positions that aren't necessarily their natural position, but that is kind of their lot at this moment, and they kind of have to make the best of it. I definitely believe there's still something to be salvaged from this season. It's not the end of the world per se, particularly because Dortmund usually does do better in the second half of the season, as we've seen over the course of the last few seasons. So they're still in the DFB Pokal, they're still in the Champions League. They could still go relatively far with that if they get their act together. And as you guys mentioned, the league isn't completely gone yet. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, like we're totally still in this title race and we still have a big chance of winning the league per se. But there's still a chance to be competitive and make a good push. Obviously, the minimum would be achieving those Champions League places. But of course, even with achieving that, it's still going to be disappointing considering the outlook we had for this coming season. And, all this talk over the last few years of like, oh yeah, we're coming for the title. We're doing this, we're doing that. And then chronically underachieving. So it's not the end of the world, but it's also not where the team should be by their own standards.
Yeah, the league has been rough. We have 6 losses so far, and if you were to go back for over the past decade, Munich has won the league every single year with a maximum of 5 losses, and we're already at 6. So I think we can probably kiss those chances of actually winning the league goodbye, unfortunately. And over the past week or two, you're starting to see a lot of people, try to point fingers at, what the problem is here. A lot of them at Vodska specifically, which is, I don't think is really a great option to look at for why, we're having all the problems that we're having. And it comes down to a lot of things. And the survey that I posted today for the midseason review was asking at one point of what do you think the main problem or issue in this squad is at the moment? And it was a few different options here that I gave. And looking at the responses so far, I'm going to keep letting these build up over the next week or so we can get more numbers. But it literally is split down the middle between the few that I mentioned, which is set pieces, recruitment, a tactically competent manager, and injuries. And really all of those you could look at are pretty huge concerns at the moment. Injuries go back for way over a calendar year now of just one person slowly being implemented back into the team while another one comes crashing out. So we're really just having a never-ending revolving door of unavailable personnel, which is just really depleting for a team because you can't really build any sort of momentum whenever you're constantly picking at the starting 11 every week with different players and trying to plug them in different holes and or different roles. So it's just not going to work. And again, we're coming back to the recruitment side of things. I mean, we're really neglecting and ignoring the glaring problems in defense when it comes to wingbacks. Of course, we invested in Schultz a few years ago, but that has obviously not worked out. And thankfully, he's never going to play for this club again for reasons that we already know. But I mean, outside of that, even before that, with his bad form, outside of that, the club knew that we needed to actually invest into another good wingback, and that just really hasn't happened yet. So we're playing a 6'5" center half at right back to be really our best attacker and defender at the moment, it seems. So it's just too much relying on a handful of individuals like Kobel or Bellingham or Sule at the moment too to produce those defensive numbers and help us keep the ship from sinking at the moment. But I mean, it just seems like we have really zero direction of what we're doing at the moment. And it's like Brian mentioned already. I mean, it's not the end of the world because we still are in the Champions League. Unlike last year, we got knocked out early. I'm not saying Chelsea's going to be easy by any means, but when it comes to being drawn against anyone else in the Champions League, we got a pretty lucky draw. And that is a winnable draw for a club like Chelsea, or for a club like us to play against Chelsea, excuse me. And in the Pokal as well. I mean, we have Bochum. That's a team that we can beat. So we can come back and make a run in both of the tournaments and at least try to pick ourselves up and aim for top 3 in the table, which I think is all very achievable, given that we have a 2-month break. People can come back and get to full fitness again, and we can give her another go.
A couple players that we could be seeing. I mean, there's a lot of players we will be seeing at the end, pending there's no serious injuries in the World Cup, but a couple players that I think can make a big difference, and I want your guys' thoughts. But of course, Dahoud, I almost forget that these guys are part of Dortmund because they've been out forever. But Jamie Bino-Gittens and Dahoud, how do you see those? Obviously, there's other players like Royce and Wolf, and Meunier has been out for a while too. But I think those two specific players can help in areas where we really need it. What do you see them coming back? Do you see them coming back and being able to make a solid contribution in the second half of the season if they can stay healthy?
I definitely feel like Jamie Bino-Gittens can definitely be of use and make a pretty good impact. I mean, prior to his injury, he was doing relatively well for the club, and he is a natural winger, which is something that we are ailing for. So it can definitely give players like Adeyemi and Malen a rest for one, and the opportunity to possibly play in a position more so related to what they're used to. I, for one, would be really interested to see Malen and Moukoko up top together. I think that could be a really dynamic partnership. And maybe we could see Malen's numbers increase from there. Because I don't believe we've seen much of that. I believe when Haaland was injured last season, we may have seen that a couple times, but they didn't really have time to build up any sort of chemistry. But even with Malen's performances, this season, he's definitely linked up relatively well with Moukoko, I'd say. I mean, he's assisted him for 1 or 2 goals as well. So I do think that having them up top together could be an interesting option. But yeah, I mean, with Dahoud, it's a little bit different because I don't believe that, and especially coming right from injury, he's going to, be better than the options that we already have. I think I would prefer to see him in the midfield more than Chan, but I still do think that Özcan is the best option. So, I mean, good for depth, but I do think of the two, Bino-Gittens will definitely have a bigger impact coming back.
Yeah, and if you go back under Terzic's first spell, you could argue that Dahoud's career was really revived under Terzic in that 6 or so month spell going into the spring, and Dahoud going away at Sevilla and putting on a show, and we went on to get a few wins after that as well. Yeah, at the very least, it's going to bring depth and it's going to bring some more creativity in our midfield. I mean, now that whenever Özcan has a knock or something like that, we really have no one else to play in that 6 role. And even though Dahoud is not a natural 6, he can sure as hell play as that single pivot at times, as he's shown under Terzic before. And I think he can bring a lot more than what people might think. But yeah, at least I'm happy to have another player in the midfield, because players out wide, wingers, and central midfielders is what I think this team is easily lacking the most at the moment.
I think just going off that, piggyback off that real quick, he could also give Bellingham a rest with the Hood back, honestly. So, I mean, there's also that. You can see that Jude has been gassed completely. Like, it's insane how tired he looks on the field at times. So,
and especially with the, all the games we've been playing, like we needed that depth early on because it might slow down a bit later in the season. I mean, it could go either way. Hopefully we're still playing games back to back, but like the games and the schedule was so heavy. We were playing every few days, and you could just tell like we don't have the squad or the ability to rotate like we needed to in those games. And that's why you're seeing Bellingham drop off, and now Özcan, like Bellingham's like a kid and he can run forever, but like he's superhuman in some ways, but maybe in that way, like it's going to wear on you eventually. And maybe that's what we're seeing too. At like the end of this half of the season, like we're just struggling and like our midfield is getting run through. We're seeing like good moments and glimpses of Bellingham lately, but it's not like he's been having full games that have been great. So yeah, that rotation there. And I thought that too is like Dahoud can be a rotation for Bellingham, even if it's like coming on in the 75th minute or 80th minute, like just getting that rest a little early. I want to go back to Jamie Bino-Gittens too, because very early on, we saw like such good things from him very early on. And if he didn't get injured, it'd just be very interesting to see like how much more he would have developed in this time. And so that, yeah, have him back is going to be really exciting too. And then this might transition into Twitter questions too, because you mentioned the Malen and Moukoko up top, but that's also a position like the dual striker that Adeyemi can do too. And I know we've needed him on the wing, but I've thought maybe that's an option too to throw him up there because he did that a lot with Salzburg. And his speed like allows him to get behind from that central position, like just to run past defenders and kind of maybe gives us the option to do what Gladbach was doing to us. But with his speed running down the middle, like it's a really good option. And he did do that at Salzburg. So it'd be interesting to see if we do like a dual striker scenario with either one or rotate that a lot, which is what, like I said, is going to lead into Twitter questions because there are some, as far as the striker situation, and people are talking about, I guess there's rumors about maybe signing another striker in the January window, if anything. And that just seems like the worst idea ever. Because Carver mentioned a lot last week where other positions where we definitely need to fill in, and it seems like we can get away. And Mokoko's just been playing so great. It's like that is not the position we really need to be looking for. But let me throw this Twitter question out here. There's a few in here, but it's from Andre Swan on Twitter. He said, rumors coming out about adding another forward if Aller isn't ready after the World Cup. What are your thoughts?
Sorry, I was just going to say one other positive, thankfully, is Adeyemi being called up to the World Cup. I mean, God forbid he does pick up another injury. Let's hope he has a very safe trip to Qatar. But him being around the national team, getting to gel with them a little bit more. Obviously, he gets more competitive matches in the next month and a half or so minimum. I think that can really do a good amount for his confidence because he's been obviously struggling at this kind of level at the moment, but now he's going to be at a new site for a while. He's going to be with a new squad. Hopefully that can rejuvenate him a bit and bring a little bit more sting to our attack so we're not looking so toothless. But yeah, with the adding of the attacker in the January window, I'm pretty skeptical of that at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. I don't think it's a great idea. I think especially with Mukoko's contract situation, and granted, we don't know if and when he will sign the extension. It looks like he will be signing an extension. But either way, even if he does sign one and we do sign another attacker, meaning striker, I guess, that would send a really bad message to him. So I don't think that's a great idea. And like you guys have said, he's been in good form. And once again, I mean, going back to what we had said earlier, playing Malen and Adeyemi in more central positions might benefit them and may benefit us in the long run as well in terms of them picking up some form as well. I definitely feel like Adeyemi in his Salzburg days did really well in a front two. And Malen is used to playing like that as well. So, I mean, you could definitely have a heavy rotation going there where you do have Malen and Moukoko or Adeyemi and Moukoko up top, and then the other one or the other coming in for whoever is more tired in that specific game. I think that could be a good way to really implement them in the squad in the way that would help them flourish the most. In addition to that, I mean, instead, if we are going to go for an attacker, it should be a wide attacker. I think that will be, if that's something that Dortmund were to do, then that would make sense. And then, of course, we're also looking at the whole Haller situation. What message would that send to Haller? You know, I think we do have enough strikers to keep us over until he is fully healthy again. So I don't think it's as pressing to go out there and look for a replacement striker.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth at the very end there. I was going to say, I wonder how much truth or how much weight that all those rumors have been holding that you mentioned about us going after another striker, just simply because, I mean, we obviously don't know all the details because everything is so private, which rightfully so, but it looks like in the last month or so, things are looking very positive for Haller's return, which is a fantastic surprise for all of us. So, you know, if those rumors, I guess I can't imagine them being true, because if it is true that he is going to maybe end chemo very soon, he wouldn't be out for the next few years if we're going to be investing for another player like that. So I think the board should be treading lightly with how we want to treat our next two strikers that should be, you know, here for the long haul, rather than addressing problems that they've been ignoring for several years now.
Yeah, off that, I was going to say, aside from Haller, it seems like we need some help in other areas, like our fullbacks, for instance, or in the middle. Like there's definitely other positions that we really need to be looking into besides up top, especially with all the, it seems like all the options we have to rotate and change things up there. Yeah, we definitely need, but yet Hazard is our go-to, like is our second left back. And then obviously Sule is playing right back right now. So, and he hasn't been bad. Gotta say he's been pretty great, but those are our options. Like we don't have any real options there.
No, it's completely chaotic.
Yeah. So another question, which we kind of just answered, but Andre also was asking about Malen turning it around. But after that, he said after the World Cup, starting 11 if everyone is fit. So ideal starting 11. Say everyone comes back healthy, good to go.
That's tough. That's very tough. Carver, how about you go first with that one?
This is a dream, but I guess that implies that Haller is fit. I'm going to probably go with the back four. Oh, man. Guerrero at left back, Schlotterbeck and Hummels, and then probably Sule for the time being until we can, I guess, Wolf or Meunier can fight for their spots on the right. And then Bellingham and Özcan, Royce, Brandt. I'd probably go Adeyemi and then Haller up top.
I think a lot of that would line up with the 11 I would definitely go with, except I would want to see the front two put in action. So either this is obviously with Haller or not, depending on whether he's fit or not. We still don't know yet with regards to that. His situation is more cloudy. But if he's not there, then I would definitely want to see Malen and Moukoko up top, or Adeyemi and Moukoko up top. And even honestly, even if Haller is good and ready to go, I'd still like to see how he would perform with a front two with Moukoko up there. I think that could be interesting as well. So
I think what you're saying, maybe like a 4-3-1-2 almost, and having more stability in the midfield. I think the players probably had a good amount of that philosophy, even going back to Rosa, since he's a player that played so narrow. And I want to say that like Terzic is maybe someone who wants to play with a little bit more width, but at the same time, I'm still struggling to see what Terzic is trying to implement to begin with. So if we want to maybe still try to stick down that road for the time being, given that we have these striker winger hybrids, yeah, we could go two up top and then having like Royce in the hole right below them to help support and attack. And then you could have three holding midfielders. And I mean, Özcan, Dahoud, and Bellingham. That could certainly help our problems controlling the midfield a little bit more and bringing creativity.
All right, this isn't a Twitter question, and also I'm just going to cop out of doing a starting lineup because you guys handled it well. Brandt, say Royce is healthy from what we saw in Royce early on in the season, or Brandt in current form. Say in that like kind of Tim position, who do you take?
Well, it's tough, right? I mean, especially in the lineup that I'm envisioning with a front two, it's unlikely that both of them would be on the pitch at the same time, right? So it would really depend on how Brandt performs coming back from the World Cup. I don't think Terzic would be throwing in Royce right away. But if we're talking about like perfect world scenario, both players at the peak of their powers, I mean Royce 100%. But realistically speaking, we just won't know how much of a load he can carry as soon as he's back from injury. I mean, granted, it's still going to be a couple months, but he wouldn't have seen like action for quite some time. So I don't know if he'd just be thrown in right there. So I'd say Brandt to start, test out the waters, and then depending on form, I mean, if Royce is in peak form, then Royce.
I'd probably go with Royce as well. And also just for the romance of it, I think he has 3 goals left until he becomes Dortmund's all-time top scorer. He was at 6 a few months back, but he just hasn't bagged a lot this season. So would love to see him break that record. And he definitely can in these next 6 months. If we, for some reason, don't extend with him, I feel like it should be no problem for him to get 3 more goals in the next 6 months.
Yeah, hopefully. I forgot he was that close. So yeah, he definitely needs to be hitting that. Because I remember we hyped it up a lot last season, and then I mean, he's been injured lately, so we just haven't talked about it at all. Mm-hmm. So we'll do one more question, which will kind of transition us like to a slight next half of the season preview, which Carver and I, as we said, we have that mid-season survey. We'll give you a little more details on that later. So we're going to do another like halfway through the season episode. Maybe that's going to be our 1-year anniversary episode. I don't know when that's going to line up, but we'll be doing that in the next week or two. But so this other question from at 50 plus Donner, what do you all feel is a realistic finish for Dortmund based on the first half? What is too much to expect and what is too little?
Realistic, and bare minimum would be 4th. Too much to expect would be to win it. But I do believe that at least 4th place should be possible. And that's sad to say because we had such high expectations, but I mean, I think I'm going to go with what I'm hoping for. And at the same time, I think is more than realistic is 3rd. I don't know if 2nd sounds something that we can really try to go for at the moment, but I'm all here for it if we want to. But this team doesn't really look like it wants to compete at the moment. So hopefully they can get a good ass kicking the ones that don't go to the World Cup and get some motivation to get us back in the top 4 and land us in a nice 3rd spot while also making some good cup runs. I think Chelsea is doable. And obviously after Bochum, we're even further in the Pokal.
Cool. All right. Well, we will, like I said, we're going to talk more mid-season and break that down a little more with your guys' help with that survey. So we'll talk about that at the end. We'll kind of give you we'll have the link for the survey, but we'll just mention it now. We'll have the link for the survey. It's on our socials. I don't know why I'm like waiting to say it. At the BVB Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and then we'll link it in the description of this episode too. Like making it some kind of big reveal.
Yeah.
But let's jump into some USMNT stuff. We don't have to do like a real heavy preview. And Carver and I mentioned that we ran through the lineup as we got it last week. So Carver, if you want to, maybe you've had a little more thoughts on that, if you want to jump into anything. But Brian, I know you kind of have 2 horses in this World Cup. If you want to explain that a little bit for the people who maybe don't know you already, you might have read Brian's articles, but if you don't follow him on Twitter or Instagram, you should, and we'll have that link too. But Brian, you want to talk about your expectations for the World Cup, and was there any standouts from the USMNT lineup or anything in general?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, like you said, I do have 2 horses in this race. Growing up in the U.S., I'll definitely be watching the U.S.'s games, but I'll definitely also be supporting Poland because that's my heritage. That's where my family's from. Unfortunately, both teams are teams that have a bunch of stars or players with star potential on them, and they like to underperform. So this could either be a really good tournament or a really depressing one. So to be determined, we'll see. With regards to the U.S. National team, though, I'm surprised to see as many attackers from MLS as they did put in. I do believe that they're taking Jordan Morris, correct?
Yes.
And it's a little surprising to see as many players from the MLS when there are players like Jordan Peacock, for example, who who are having such a good season. For example, him being as pivotal as he has been for Union Berlin this season, and seeing him not go or not be selected, I think that was a little surprising. But I mean, otherwise, I feel like a lot of the choices were pretty standard. I mean, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic. I mean, all these are names that you would expect to see. So my main surprise came around, the choices made in attack.
Yeah, and I'll run through the lineup. We mentioned it last week, but we always have new listeners, so thank you for listening. A quick shout. But goalkeepers, Matt Turner. At number 1, we have Ethan Horvath and Johnson, who's from MLS. Defenders, we have Dest, Zimmerman, Robinson, Anthony Robinson, that is, Tim Ream, Aaron Long, Shaq Moore, Cameron Carter-Vickers, DeAndre Yedlin, and Joe Scally, who you saw in Gladbach tear us up over the weekend, or on Friday. Midfielders, we have Tyler Adams, Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie, Brendan Aronson, Luca De La Torre, Roldan from, I don't remember which Roldan because there's 2 of them and they're both from Seattle. One of the Roldan brothers, and Kellen Acosta. And forward up to top, we have Gio Reyna, Jesus Ferreira, Christian Pulisic, Jordan Morris, as you said, from MLS, Haji Wright, Tim Weah, and Josh Sargent is the U.S. squad.
Yeah, after letting it marinate after a few days, I kind of understand the pick of Morris a little bit more, simply because I'm imagining Greg wants attackers that can run behind defenses, and at the moment, the only player that can really do that is Weah. So I imagine he's wanting a little bit more pace up front and someone who could make those runs in behind, rather than going with just target man after target man and Wright, Pepe, Peacock, etc. But I still haven't really thought or found out the reason why we went with Shaq Moore, because we have like 3 other right backs in that pool of players. So that one is still a bit of a head scratcher for me. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this team performs. I mean, Berhalter said that, we don't have much of the talent compared to a lot of these other big teams around the world, but we do have brotherhood. And these players have been growing together consistently for the past however many years now, and we've been wanting to see them finally perform. We won the Gold Cup, we've won the Nations League, the men's national team over the past year, but anytime we step outside of that and have any competition like Japan in a friendly, we're going to get ripped apart. So I'm interested to see how this team can go to a tournament like the World Cup and compete against the best.
Did he really say that? I've missed that.
The brotherhood part? Yeah.
Well, the other thing, the talent-wise, because I think that's something, granted, it's not like all of England is from the Premier League except Bellingham, so it's not talent like that, and I get that. But isn't one thing we're all holding on to is like the young talent we have and the fact that we have so many players, top players, playing in Europe? Like, that's something we're holding on to. So for him to just slight that, like, that makes me really mad, honestly. And the brotherhood thing, like, shut up, dude. God, get out of here. Ugh.
This is definitely the most talented U.S. side I think I've seen. So in terms of just the names and the quality and where they play. So I do think there is a lot of potential there. But obviously, depending on whether or not Berhalter can harness that and whether the players show up, I mean, that'll really depend on, or that'll be what, kind of defines their performance in this tournament, I think.
So on their performance, so we are in Group B. First game is next Monday, or this coming Monday, against Wales, 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. All the games are at that time, 2 o'clock. Then we have England. When is that? Oh, Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving.
25th.
Yeah, which is going to be exciting. Good holiday watch right there. And then we in the group with Iran on the following Tuesday. So expectations for US in the group. Brian, you can give some Polish expectations too. I'm cool with that. But USMNT expectations, do you see us getting out of the group?
I think this is definitely a group that the US can get out of. I mean, the Wales team that they will be facing doesn't have prime Gareth Bale anymore. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of whether he got chosen for the team or not, but I would assume he did. So I mean, it's not the same team that, excelled or achieved what they did previously in previous tournaments. So, I mean, I think they can definitely get away with a point or a win there. With England, I mean, obviously that's going to be a bit more challenging. There's a bit more of a disparity there in terms of the talent on display. But then again, it is England, so you never know. I would say that is the most likely one to be a loss. And then, of course, the game against Iran, I do believe that, the U.S. should be able to get through that and make a push at least into the next round.
Wales doesn't have prime Gareth Bale, but Wales does have Welsh Gareth Bale, which he always performs really, really well for the country, weirdly enough. So
fair point.
I feel like the game against Wales is a complete toss-up. I mean, they have a lot of good players in their squad, and I can imagine us, going out and really proving a lot of critics wrong, including myself, and getting a result. And I can also imagine us crashing and burning out of this World Cup. So I think the tone is going to be set against Wales because, I mean, England, we're going to be obviously the big underdogs there, but given how England usually perform at international stages, maybe we could pick something, but probably not. And then it's going to come down to against Iran, which I can also imagine us, being a 0-0 for 88 minutes and us having a bunch of shots, but not really creating anything of real substance, and then Iran getting one in the counterattack to knock us out. So I think the tone's going to be set here come against Wales.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always optimistic, but I can definitely see us just like collapsing and crashing out and not getting like any really good results. But my optimism and what I actually think is I think we can get a result against Wales and surprise people. I think England, it'll be tough, but maybe pure like passion and 4th of July, I don't know, inflamed, raging Americans fighting for their freedom will be able to pull something off and get at least a draw. I see like
4th of July in the middle of November.
But hey, if this was in the summer, different story.
I honestly hear you. This is like the only time where I'm going to be standing for the anthem and actually getting hyped for the country. Any other time, not repping the red, white, and blue.
But for England, I think best case scenario, like we can get a draw. I think that's a realistic option is us getting a draw. And this is definitely St. Louis biased, but having Tim Ream, and in a game where we're going to need to sit back a little more, bringing him into the lineup and having him start that game, and our other Premier League experienced guys like Tyler Adams, the fact that he's been playing against this all Premier League side England team, like it's going to be beneficial. And having those two guys specifically and our other talent, like I just think we can actually get a result from that game, riding on freedom, hopefully. And then Iran's a toss-up. Obviously, we think hopefully we can get the win there. But I am optimistic, and I think we can get out of the group. I don't know how far we're going to go after that, but I do have some. I think out of all the European just teams, like England is our best bet. Not counting Wales, but like the big European clubs like Italy and Germany and all that. Like England is who we'd want to draw because we have that little extra fire to prove something. You know what I mean? So that's where I stand with that. Do you have any lineup predictions? I think it's going to rotate heavily, especially from Wales to England, because I did mention Tim Ream, but I don't think Tim Ream will start against Wales. Do you have a lineup prediction against Wales or an ideal lineup?
I don't really know yet, honestly. I feel like I'll probably have to keep thinking about it over the next few days. But I'm interested to see, I guess, if Berhalter's wanting to play Reina in the middle as opposed to being a winger on this in this tournament, because he can link up attacks so well, given how how well he does it for Dortmund at times. But at the same time, I don't know what our midfield or attack is going to look like. I'm thinking maybe. If I were Berhalter, but if I were coach, I would probably have a midfield of Musa, Adams, and either Reina or Aronson. But Reina and Aronson both are starts for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same boat. I also don't watch enough of the U.S. national team to give an accurate view on what their lineup should be. But I definitely do believe that if Greg Berhalter wants to get the best out of Gio Reyna, I think he should be more in the middle of the pitch. And I think him and Aronson should be fighting for that spot, because I believe both can play a similar position. And I think both will be suited to competing for a starting position there. But one player that I do believe should definitely be in the lineup is Tyler Adams. I know he has been killing it for Leeds, and he's done a really good job of replacing Calvin Phillips for him. All I hear is, really good things about him. Whenever I see anything about Leeds or anything like that, they love him over there. I do believe he's quite a dynamic midfielder, and I do think he'll do a good job in midfield. So if there were two players or a player that I think that should definitely be in that lineup, it should be Adams.
Yeah. Cool. So again, USA versus Wales, Monday, the 21st, 2 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry, 1 p.m. Central for us in St. Louis. Before we wrap up, we do have a bit of an announcement, which went out on Twitter today. And this is specifically like for our St. Louis listeners, or if you're not in St. Louis, but you're randomly coming to St. Louis on Wednesday. Our new MLS club is playing a friendly match against Bayer Leverkusen to open the new stadium, City Park. And Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt and the Gegenpressing podcast is coming to town, and we will be doing like a live podcast Q&A during the supporters group tailgate. It's the St. Louligans. They're having a tailgate party at Schlafly, which is literally like 50 feet from the stadium. So they're going to be tailgating. We'll be inside Schlafly at 4:30. So if you can make it, definitely come out. We're going to be talking St. Louis, obviously. All the new signings we just got. We're going to be talking just Bundesliga in general. Leverkusen I keep liking all these Leverkusen tweets because they're in St. Louis now, and I'm like, this is weird because I'm not in any way a fan of Leverkusen. It's just so exciting that like this is happening, and more from a St. Louis fan perspective. But the Bundesliga connection. So we're going to talk Bundesliga. We'll talk all that, and it's just going to be a really cool time and just cool hanging with Manuel. And we're going to be recording it. So it's going to be a podcast that's going to be out, whether it's on ours or Gegenpressing or both. We're also doing a collaboration with another podcast that I work with, Flyover Footy here in St. Louis. So it's kind of a mixed bag panel almost. It's going to be really fun. So again, that's Wednesday, 4:30. Kickoff is at 7 o'clock. Carver, do you have anything to add to that?
Excited for the show. Really excited for the game. I've only been outside of the stadium. I was offered a tour once for being one of the, I'm not going to say academy, but like kids program that they have for the St. Louis City team. I'm one of the coaches there, and they offered me a tour less than 24 hours in advance. And I was like, I work tomorrow. Could I come another time? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay. So I've only ever seen the stadium from outside, but oh man, am I excited for this one. I cannot wait to be inside the stadium and finally see all the vendors. Looks like a lot of the vendors, or all the vendors, are very much focused around the St. Louis community. So a lot of different great cuisines and everything, and get to see just the field up close and watch some good soccer. So really excited.
So I think that wraps this episode. But Brian, thank you so much for joining us again. It's been great, and I'm gonna say it for real, like we need to get you on probably sooner rather than later, because it's always great having you on. So we really appreciate you joining us.
No, of course. Always great talking Dortmund and soccer in general with you guys. Glad you guys could have me, and looking forward to the next time for sure.
Yes, thank you, Brian.
Awesome. And then real quick, of course, we'll have it all linked in the description of this episode, but do you want to let people know how they can find you online?
Yeah, for sure. Best way to reach me or find my content is to find me on Twitter, and my Twitter is Brian_Straub94. And like you guys said, you're going to link it because I doubt, it's easy. It's something that's easy for people to think of how to spell. So yeah, just look at the post. You'll find all the information there.
All right. Well, hey, anything you need, our Twitter, Instagram, website, everything's in the description. Basically, what you learned from this is go to the description of this episode, and you can find literally everything you need. And then, so hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday in person. It's going to be super fun. And other than that, we'll talk with you next week, because we are going to be covering USMNT stuff. So we'll be back with a World Cup episode soon. So thank you guys. See you later. You guys can say bye too.
Bye.
See ya.